All right, so we've got a ton of cybersecurity news to unpack today, December 18th, 2024. Some pretty major developments and some breaking incidents as always.
Yeah, definitely a busy day on the cyber front. Let's jump right in. We can start with Bureau. They're a risk intelligence platform, and they just secured a $30 million investment. Now, big funding rounds aren't that unusual in cybersecurity these days, but this one, it's the reason behind it and their approach that are pretty interesting.
So what makes Bureau different? What are they focusing on?
Well, they're specifically targeting deepfakes and payment fraud. And those are two areas, as you know, that have just exploded in activity recently.
Yeah, no kidding. Deepfakes are getting scarily good, and the potential for damage is huge.
Exactly. And Bureau, they're not just throwing money at the problem, they're tackling it head on. They're building this massive database, over 500 million records, and the whole point of it is to identify fake identities.
Wow, 500 million records. So how did that work? Are they like analyzing faces or something?
It's pretty sophisticated. They're analyzing all sorts of things, facial features for sure, but also online behavior patterns, financial transaction histories. They're creating these comprehensive profiles that can actually expose deepfakes in real time.
So it's like a next level fraud detection system, but for digital identities.
That's a great way to put it. And think about the implications, not just for banks and financial institutions, but for any organization that deals with online authentication.
Right. I mean, this could be huge for preventing election interference or fighting identity theft or even just verifying the authenticity of online content. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Absolutely. This kind of tech has the potential to really change the game.
Okay, so from fighting fraud to navigating geopolitical tensions, we've got news out of Russia. They just labeled Recorded Future, that's a leading threat intelligence firm, as undesirable. And this comes right as MasterCard is about to finalize a $2.6 billion acquisition of the company.
Yeah, talk about bad timing, right? Recorded Future is known for their deep analysis of cyber threats, and that includes threats coming from nation-state actors. So this move by Russia is almost certainly a reaction to their reporting, especially in light of, well, everything that's going on with Ukraine.
So it's a way to silence them, basically, to control the narrative.
Yeah, pretty much. But it also raises some serious questions about, the future of threat intelligence gathering. If countries start banning firms like Recorded Future, how are we supposed to get accurate information about these threats?
That's a scary thought. We rely on these companies to provide independent and unbiased analysis.
Exactly. This ban, it could create these blind spots and make it harder for everyone to track emerging threats.
All right, well, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about what's happening in the U.S. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, they've issued a binding directive for all federal agencies to secure their cloud configurations by 2025.
Yeah, this is a big deal. We've been seeing pretty lax cloud security practices across government agencies for years, and this directive, they're calling it SCUBA, by the way. It sets a hard deadline and mandates strict compliance. No more messing around.
So no more excuses.
Yeah.
But what does it actually mean to secure their cloud configurations? Like, what are the specifics?
Well, these SCUDA baselines, they cover a pretty wide range of areas, everything from identity and access management to data encryption, vulnerability scanning, incident response planning, the whole nine yards. Basically, they're making sure that agencies have robust controls in place to protect sensitive data that's stored in the cloud.
This feels like a significant step, right, towards strengthening the U.S. government's cybersecurity posture.
Definitely. And it's also likely to have a ripple effect, don't you think? On the private sector, I mean.
Yeah, definitely. We're already seeing this trend, right, towards stricter cloud security standards across all industries.
Exactly. So this directive could really accelerate that trend, kind of setting a new benchmark for best practices.
Okay, so moving on to some specific vulnerabilities and exploits that have surfaced. Beyond Trust, they had to patch a critical vulnerability in their privileged remote access, the PRA, and remote support tools, the RS tools. And this was after it was actually exploited in a customer security incident. Talk about PR nightmare.
Ouch. Yeah. And adding insult to injury, we've got hackers actively exploiting a severe flaw in Apache Struts too. That one's particularly nasty because, Struts is so widely used. It's a popular web application framework.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? A company that specializes in security solutions getting hit with a vulnerability like that shows you that no one is immune.
That's the truth. It's a constant cat and mouse game. That's why having a layered security approach is absolutely crucial. You got to assume that vulnerabilities exist, and you need multiple layers of defense ready to go to mitigate the risk.
Speaking of threats, let's talk about AI. Big topic these days. The EU AI Act is going into full force in February 2025, big penalties for non-compliance. And this is really landmark legislation. It's aiming to regulate the use of AI and address some of the potential risks.
It's definitely one of the most comprehensive attempts to regulate AI that we've seen globally. They're classifying AI systems based on risk levels and setting strict requirements for high-risk applications, especially when it comes to sensitive data, critical infrastructure, law enforcement, that sort of thing.
So it's about setting some boundaries,
Yeah.
right? Making sure AI is used responsibly. But there are also concerns about stifling innovation, hindering the development of beneficial AI applications.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance for sure. The goal is to promote innovation while mitigating the risks. It's a tough act, finding that right balance between regulation and, allowing for the responsible development and deployment of AI.
Okay, and speaking of the risks of AI, the IBM Cloud Threat Report is basically waving a giant red flag about the potential for AI-driven attacks. Their point is, as AI adoption grows, so do the opportunities for bad actors to weaponize it.
And it's already happening. We're seeing AI used to generate super convincing phishing emails, craft sophisticated social engineering attacks, even automate the exploitation of vulnerabilities.
It's like giving hackers superpowers.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. But it also means that we, on the defense side, need to step up our game big time. We need to leverage AI for good, use it to enhance our security tools and defenses.
And we need to be prepared for the day when AI becomes the primary weapon in the hands of cybercriminals.
Exactly. We got to start thinking about how to defend against AI-powered attacks, and that requires, new approaches, new tools, and a whole new level of understanding about how AI can be used for malicious purposes.
Okay, let's shift to some specific incidents now. Cisco, a company known for, their networking equipment and security solutions, well, they've suffered a data leak, apparently due to a configuration error.
Yeah, and what's really concerning about this one is that from what we're hearing, the leaked data includes source code for some of their core networking products. That's a goldmine for attackers. They can analyze that code, find vulnerabilities, and potentially develop really targeted exploits.
It's just a reminder that even the most security-conscious organizations can be brought down by something as simple as, a human error, a misconfiguration.
Oh, absolutely. And it highlights the need for robust security protocols, continuous monitoring, employee training. You got to mitigate those risks associated with misconfigurations.
Right. And speaking of needing to stay vigilant, Google is warning Gmail users about a fresh wave of phishing attacks.
Phishing, it never goes away, does it? It's still one of the most effective attack vectors. But what's interesting is how the tactics are getting more sophisticated. We're seeing fake invoices, extortion scams, even really targeted attacks that use personal information that's been gleaned from social media.
So it's not just those generic "you've won the lottery" emails anymore.
Nope, it's way more personalized and convincing. Attackers are using social engineering, psychological manipulation to trick users into, clicking on malicious links or giving up sensitive information.
Which is why user education is just so important. We've got to teach people how to recognize these phishing attempts and avoid them.
Couldn't agree more. Security awareness training is absolutely crucial in today's threat landscape.
Okay, so let's dive into some of the more creative tactics we're seeing from cyber criminals these days. We've got reports of hackers using HubSpot tools for credential theft, and also deploying rogue remote desktop protocol configurations, RDP, in their attacks.
It's a classic example of how attackers are constantly adapting and finding new ways to exploit technology. HubSpot, it's a legitimate marketing automation platform. But in the wrong hands, it can be used to launch phishing campaigns, steal credentials, spread malware, all sorts of nasty stuff.
Right, so it's a reminder that any tool can be weaponized.
Exactly. And the use of those rogue RDP configurations, that's particularly worrisome. RDP allows remote access to computers. So attackers, they often exploit misconfigured or vulnerable RDP servers to gain unauthorized access to entire networks.
It's like leaving a back door wide open.
Pretty much. That's why it's so important to properly secure those RDP connections, strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, all of that.
Okay, and now for something a little different. Interpol is advocating for a name change for the pig butchering scam. They want to call it romance baiting instead. The idea is to encourage more victims to come forward without feeling embarrassed.
Yeah, the term pig butchering, it is pretty graphic, and it can definitely deter victims from reporting these scams. So by renaming it to romance baiting, Interpol is trying to reduce the stigma, encourage victims to seek help without shame. It's an important step in addressing the psychological impact of these scams and, ultimately bringing those perpetrators to justice.
It also reflects the growing awareness of the emotional manipulation and psychological tactics that are used in these scams.
Oh, absolutely. Attackers, they often spend weeks or even months building trust and rapport with their victims before they lure them into these fake investment schemes. It's really cruel.
Yeah, it's a calculated tactic. They prey on people's vulnerabilities. So by changing the name to romance baiting, Interpol's making it clear that these aren't legitimate investments. They're elaborate scams designed to steal money.
Right. And hopefully this change will encourage more victims to come forward and report these crimes. And that could help law enforcement track down the perpetrators and shut down these operations.
More data for law enforcement, the better. It can help them identify patterns and, ultimately hold those criminals accountable.
Exactly. The more we can raise awareness about these scams and encourage reporting, the better equipped we'll be to fight back. And now for something that could really shake things up. The U.S. government, well, they're considering a ban on TP-Link routers. Can you believe that?
Whoa, a ban. TP-Link is one of the biggest names in routers, right?
Hmm.
Especially for, like, home users and small businesses.
Exactly. Huge market share. And the reason? Security concerns.
Security concerns. Okay, so what are we talking about specifically? What's got the government so worried?
Well, there have been, concerns about TP-Link routers for a while now. Vulnerabilities in their firmware, allegations of backdoors, stuff like that.
Backdoors, like allowing unauthorized access.
Potentially, yeah. And the U.S. government, their biggest worry is that these routers could be compromised and then used for, espionage or cyber attacks.
So it's not just about protecting individual users then. It's about national security.
Right. But, a ban like this, it would have a huge impact on consumers and businesses.
No kidding. I mean, TP-Link routers, they're everywhere. They're affordable. They're easy to find. If those are suddenly off the market, prices are going to go up. And people's choices are going to be limited.
Totally. And then there's the whole issue of, what about other router brands? What about supply chain security in general?
Right. It's like if TP-Link is considered a threat, what about other devices that are manufactured in countries that, that we might have geopolitical conflicts with? It opens a whole can of worms.
It does. This potential ban, it forces us to think about the trust we put in these tech manufacturers and the need for stricter security standards across the entire supply chain.
Okay, well, while the U.S. is thinking about restrictions, over in Africa, things are moving in a more positive direction. Concordia University and the UNDP, the United Nations Development Program, they're launching a cybersecurity initiative.
That's good to hear. Africa's digital economy is growing so rapidly, but they're facing some serious cybersecurity challenges.
Yeah, definitely. So what's the focus of this initiative?
Well, they're trying to bridge the cybersecurity skills gap, providing training, resources, support to individuals and organizations across the continent.
It's great to see that recognition, right?
Yeah.
That cybersecurity is a global issue and that we need to work together to address it.
Absolutely. Stronger cybersecurity in developing regions, it benefits everyone, not just those countries themselves, but it enhances global security as a whole.
All right, well, let's shift gears a bit now and talk about the human side of cybersecurity. A new survey came out, and it's pretty eye-opening. It says 70% of cybersecurity professionals are experiencing negative emotions due to workplace stress. Yeah.
That's a worrying statistic. Not surprising, though, unfortunately.
Why not surprising?
Well, I mean, cybersecurity, it's a high-pressure field, right?
Yeah.
Constantly evolving threats, complex systems, the potential consequences if something goes wrong, they're huge.
And it's 24/7, nonstop. The stakes are incredibly high.
Exactly. Burnout and stress, they're a real problem in this industry.
So what can we do about it?
We need to do a better job of supporting the mental health and well-being of cybersecurity professionals. That means promoting work-life balance, providing access to mental health resources, and creating a workplace culture that, encourages open communication about stress and burnout.
It's about recognizing that cybersecurity, it's not just about the technology. It's about the people.
Right. We need to invest in our people just as much as we invest in our tools and systems.
Speaking of investments, Instill, their cybersecurity staffing and solutions provider, they're expanding their workforce. This is after their acquisition of Vertical Structure. Seems like the demand for cybersecurity talent just keeps growing.
The skill shortage is a huge problem. Organizations are desperate for qualified professionals. This acquisition, it allows Instill to tap into a wider pool of talent, expand their services. It's a smart move.
It also shows that the cybersecurity industry is, booming, but It highlights the need for more education and training programs to develop that next generation of professionals.
Absolutely. We need to get more people interested in cybersecurity and give them the skills they need to succeed.
Okay, let's circle back to some of the earlier stories for a minute. Remember that Cisco data leak we were talking about? Well, it looks like the hackers might have gotten their hands on some pretty valuable stuff. Source code, certificates, the works.
Yeah, this is not good. Stolen source code, it's a treasure trove for attackers. They can analyze it, find vulnerabilities, exploit them, and compromise certificates. Those can be used to impersonate legitimate websites or services, leading to, phishing attacks and all kinds of fraud.
So this leak could have some serious consequences down the road.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a harsh reminder that even organizations with strong security reputations, they're not invincible. Protecting sensitive data, it's an ongoing battle.
And speaking of staying vigilant, Google's issued another warning about phishing attacks. This time they're targeting Gmail users.
The never-ending phishing saga. What's interesting is that Google, they're actually deploying AI-powered defenses to try and stay ahead of the attackers.
So it's like an AI arms race now.
Kind of, yeah. Google's using AI to enhance their phishing detection, but the attackers are using AI to craft more convincing, personalized phishing emails. It's a constant game of cat and mouse.
It also shows that even with all the fancy technology we have, human error is still a major factor.
It is. Attackers are good at exploiting our weaknesses, whether it's through social engineering or just tricking us into clicking on a bad link.
And then there's the whole AI-driven attack thing that we were talking about earlier. That IBM Cloud Threat Report, they're saying that while those attacks are still pretty rare, they're about to explode. As AI adoption grows, so will the threat.
We're on the cusp of a major shift in the threat landscape. We need to be ready for a future where AI is used not just to defend, but to attack. And that means new ways of thinking, new tools, new levels of collaboration between everyone involved in cybersecurity.
Okay, and speaking of emerging threats, Chuck Brooks, he's a well-known cybersecurity expert, he's just released a new book. It's called Inside Cyber. And he really delves into the potential risks of AI, 5G, even quantum computing.
Inside Cyber, yeah, it's a good read. Brooks, he's really pushing us to start preparing for what he calls Q-Day. That's the day when quantum computers become powerful enough to break our current encryption algorithms, which would be, catastrophic.
Quantum computing, it sounds like science fiction.
I don't know, right? But it's a very real threat. And it highlights how cybersecurity isn't just about protecting computers and networks anymore. It's about managing the risks of these emerging technologies and being prepared for a future where the threat landscape is constantly evolving.
Okay, and remember that whole thing with Russia labeling recorded future as undesirable? Well, they've also accused the U.S. of engaging in cyber espionage. They're claiming that the U.S. has been targeting Russian tech firms, stealing trade secrets.
It's a classic case of, finger pointing. Cybersecurity, it's become this battleground, and it's tough to know who to believe. Attribution in cyber attacks is incredibly difficult, so it's hard to say for sure who's doing what and why.
But these accusations, they highlight the tensions that are simmering in cyberspace.
Totally. It's a reflection of that, geopolitical rivalry that's going on. And the use of cyber attacks as a tool of espionage, economic warfare, it's messy.
And it's not just nation states, right? Cyber criminals are getting in on the action too. There's a new report out that says hackers have stolen $5 million in cryptocurrency using credentials that were stolen in the LastPass breach. That breach was last year.
Ugh, that LastPass breach, it keeps coming back to haunt us. This just shows you the long-term impact of data breaches. Stolen credentials, they can be valuable to attackers for years. They can access accounts, steal money, launch further attacks.
It's a reminder that we need to take password security seriously.
Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, and, keep an eye on your accounts for any suspicious activity.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground here. AI, government bans, international espionage, cryptocurrency heists. What's next? Drone armies.
Funny you should mention drones, because, they're becoming a bigger and bigger cybersecurity concern.
Really? How so?
Well, drones, they have legitimate uses, of course, but they can also be exploited by bad actors.
For what, spying?
Spying, yeah. But also, potentially, physical attacks, weaponized drones, that sort of thing. It's a real concern.
It sounds like something out of a movie.
I know, but it's the reality we're living in. We need to figure out how to protect ourselves against these threats, develop safeguards, regulations, make sure drones are used responsibly.
So we've got AI-powered hackers, quantum computers, government bans, drone armies. It's a lot to process. It's a wild world out there right now in cyberspace. I mean, is there any good news? Any reason for optimism amidst all this chaos?
Well, the cybersecurity community, they're not just sitting back and letting it all happen. We're seeing a ton of innovation, a lot of collaboration to try and stay ahead of the game.
So what are we talking about specifically?
Advancements in threat intelligence sharing. For example, there's a big push to make detection and response capabilities faster, more efficient, and security awareness training, that's getting a lot more engaging, which is crucial.
That is good to hear. I mean, it's easy to get lost in all the doom and gloom, but it's important to remember that there are a lot of brilliant people out there working hard to keep us safe.
It's a constant battle for sure,
Yeah.
but one we're actively fighting, and, technology is only part of the solution.
What else is there?
Well, raising awareness about the risks, that's huge. Empowering individuals to protect themselves, that's just as important.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. It's not just up to the experts. So we've come to the end of our deep dive into the cybersecurity landscape of December 18th, 2024. From deepfakes to drone swarms, we've covered a lot.
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. We've seen how geopolitical tensions are spilling over into the cyber world, the growing threat of AI, the persistent challenges of vulnerabilities, and human error.
And those stressed out cybersecurity professionals, we can't forget about them. They're the unsung heroes in all of this.
They really are. It's a good reminder that cybersecurity isn't just about bits and bytes. It's about people, their livelihoods, their safety.
So as we wrap up, what's the key takeaway for our listeners today? What can they do to navigate this complex and ever-changing threat landscape?
Stay informed, stay vigilant, stay proactive. Keep your software updated, be cautious of phishing attempts, and use those strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, whenever you can. But most importantly, keep learning. Educate yourself about those emerging threats. Invest in your own cybersecurity knowledge.
Knowledge is power, as they say. And remember, you don't have to go it alone.
There are tons of resources out there to help you stay safe online.
Like Cybersecurity HQ.
Exactly. They do a fantastic job of covering industry news. They have job postings, insightful reports. It's a valuable resource for anyone who wants to stay ahead of the curve.
And their weekly newsletter that reaches over 70,000 professionals. So whether you're a seasoned cybersecurity pro or just starting out, Cybersecurity HQ is a great place to stay connected and informed.
So to sum it all up, stay informed, stay engaged, stay secure.
Cybersecurity HQ, your hub for jobs, reports, news, and a newsletter read by 70,000 plus professionals weekly.